what we have in our region, and from where I'm based in Rockhampton, perhaps further north across Australia, is really extensive grazing livestock and largely beef. But because I'm a plant scientist and because I know that there can be great opportunities that come from growing crops, we're looking at options for other crops in Australia, particularly across the north. Largely, we grow cotton and sugarcane. There are other tree and horticultural crops. But what we're looking to do is to find options for producers that they can be growing new crops that might be high value, that might be profitable, and that work really well in their systems.
Welcome to the Crop Science Podcast Show, brought to you by Wisenetics. I'm Brian Arnell, and I'm coming to you from the campus of Oklahoma State University. Today, we are happy to have on with us Dr. Tieneke Trotter. She is a crop and pasture agronomist, a researcher and teacher at Central Queensland University in Australia. Dr. Trotter is a crop and pasture agronomist, and her current research involves assessing agronomy and plant physiology for emerging crop industries in Northern Australia with a focus on spice, peanut, and pulse crops. She has worked in many research and consultancy projects utilizing remote sensing GIS agritech to monitor impacts of mining on agriculture environments. Tieneke's current research projects focus on emerging northern cropping industries, opportunities for agriculture on solar farms, and developing opportunities for post-mining economies and agriculture industries. Dr. Trotter, I'm so happy to have you on our podcast today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So tell us a little bit of, how did you end up in your position and why did you choose the path you did working with such a range? Because this is not a focused, I'm not trying to be mean, but your research isn't necessarily focused into a tiny thing. It's quite broad and encompassing, as I would look at it.
Absolutely. So I guess if I was to pick a focus of what I do, I would say I work in plants largely, and I work in agriculture. But how broad is that as a field? It's an incredible and interesting place that we work in. I guess my entry into this area was fairly unconventional. I grew up in Sydney in Australia throughout my high school years, and Sydney is, although a small city compared to US standards, it's one of our largest cities in Australia. So I grew up in the middle of the city, and I had this very keen interest in agriculture that was fostered by an opportunity to study agriculture at high school. When I got to the end of high school, I had no idea what I wanted to do, but I was very interested in studying in the sciences, and there was a great course that was offered to be able to study applied science in agriculture through the University of Sydney, and I absolutely loved that degree. A lot of people, particularly young women, go into that degree thinking, I love animals and I want to transition into veterinary studies. But I soon found a very keen interest in plant sciences. So that's where I ended up, was in that plant science space, even in my late teens and early 20s. From there, I moved out of the city and I ended up out in the country. In regional New South Wales in Armidale, and I had the great opportunity to do some work in invasive species in pastures. So I was working on serrated tussock, which is a native down in Argentina, but has been introduced into Australia, and then I decided within that PhD, because it is research and you get to sort of pick a bit of a path, was to extend my skills. So rather than just working in ecology and agronomy of pastures, I decided I'd pick up a few extra skills, and that's what led me to working in remote sensing and in that ag tech area. And I think that's probably where everything then branches out from, because once you've got skills in ag tech and remote sensing, they can apply across a number of different areas. And then I guess I have just followed paths of listening to producers, hearing issues and problems that they may have, and working out ways that we can solve it using our skill sets and our resources through the university.
That's fantastic, Tinka. So tell us a little bit about, what's your ongoing work? What's some of the fun things that your research program's working in right now?
Well, at the moment, because I am now working in Central Queensland, which is in the arid tropics of northern Australia. So
The arid tropics. That's just an interesting phrase right there. But
it's an unusual concept, I think, across a lot of the US. When I've travelled throughout the US receives so much more rainfall across a larger area of the landmass than we do in Australia. Australia is a very, very dry continent, so we are tropics because we are quite warm. We can be quite humid, but we're arid. We don't get a huge amount of rainfall. So it is a fun concept. It's a fun term, and it comes with that. It comes a lot of challenges, and often opposite challenges to what we see when we're working in cropping, particularly in the US.
hmm
Um, what we have in our region, and from where I'm based in Rockhampton, perhaps further north across Australia, is really extensive grazing livestock and largely beef. But because I'm a plant scientist and because I know that there can be great opportunities that come from growing crops, we're looking at options for other crops in Australia,
hmm
particularly across the north. Largely, we grow cotton and sugarcane. There are other tree and horticultural crops. But what we're looking to do is to find options for producers that they can be growing new crops that might be high value, that might be profitable, and that work really well in their systems. So over the last few years, the things that we've been investigating are some of the spice crops that are grown largely across the world, but we import into Australia. So we're looking at options for Australian producers to be growing a variety of different spice crops. And when we've done our scoping studies, the one that really came up in front as a really good front runner and one that we would like to emerge as a brand new industry in Australia is in sesame.
Fascinating. What other before we dive into sesame, because I've played with some spice crops here in Oklahoma, and it's been an adventure. I'll just put it that way. Some of the things we've tried to grow. So what are some of the other, spices that you've tried in your region?
So the scoping project that we looked at originally, and I'm only laughing because we've had the same issue in Australia. There are so many challenges. The seeds are small. It's not like a nice wheat crop or a corn crop where you've got that larger seed size. And there's so much to be said for having just a larger seed to plant or to harvest.
hmm
But before we go to those sorts of challenges, the crops that we have looked at, we've looked at black and white sesame.
hmm
We've looked at kalonji, which is also known as nigella, which is a small black seed and it's an oil crop.
hmm
We've looked at fennel and cumin. We've studied into coriander and a couple of those other smaller seed based crops that could be used for the seed product or the oil product.
We've tried some fennel, cumin. Cumin was one of the most interesting ones that we tried and did not succeed very well with, but we gave it a good college go, I guess you'd say.
I have heard that saying before. Um, yeah, cumin did very well in Australia, but when we select a crop to take it forward, we look at it holistically.
hmm
And although the plant grew quite well and we got very nice quality seed off it, there were some challenges that would slow down the commercialization of it. For example, it was very small.
hmm
And so to be able to get a conventional harvester under it and to harvest the seed and to be mechanized, which we really need to be in Australia. Our landmass is very large, our labour force is very small. So we need everything to be mechanized. Human has got incredible potential, but we're going to have to work on a lot of agricultural engineering projects before we can actually continue with that agronomic package.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. You picking out the sesame because it does provide a large crop. I mean, a taller crop. It is We've harvested sesame with our traditional combines. It takes some adjustment and settings, but yeah, it's not anything out of the realm. Our planters could handle it fine, and our combines could do the same. So tell us a little bit more about the investigation into sesame.
Yes, so the first thing that we did with Sesame was just work out which geographical areas across the north we could grow it. So when I talk about the north, I'm only talking about throughout Queensland, the Northern Territory, and the top of Western Australia.
Mm.
But that land mass is almost half the width of the US. That's a really large area. So we've grown sesame across a number of those different areas. Some of them are the wet tropics, where we get pretty significant monsoon and summer rains, and then a dry season. And then some of those areas are where we get a genuine winter, a beautiful hot summer, but we actually do get a genuine winter, and then sesame's not going to grow
Hmm.
in that area. Now, when I say a genuine winter, please don't be thinking snow. We definitely don't get snow. Um, we may still be many degrees above a frost.
Frost. Okay.
So it just isn't well suited, and you want it to be able to grow quite well. And so cold temperatures for sesame is limiting. So we looked at those geographical areas where it grows, and what seasons it will grow in. The other investigations that we've done are to work out what are the optimal times of sowing. How do we adjust and work with different planting densities? And the reason why we want to do that is because we're trying to integrate into existing systems, into existing farming systems. So in order to encourage producers, farmers to pick up a new cropping option, we want to make it easy for them. So we don't want to tell them that they have to have new row spacings. We don't want to tell them that they have to change their bed configurations or how they irrigate their crop. We want to work in with those systems. So we've worked out how to get the seed into the ground and singulation, and get those seed spacings and row spacings to work to optimize the yield based off a variety of different farming configurations and systems. And then we've been looking at how we can just fit sesame into those systems, how we manage the nutrients from one crop to the next, how we manage water. Sesame is largely going to be an irrigated crop in Australia, and
Oh, interesting.
we don't, because of the supply of an inconsistent supply of rainfall, particularly in winter. So in the north, in winter, we could expect to receive no rainfall for months.
Hmm.
We have grown sesame dry land, and in a summer that was quite desperate, and with very little rainfall, we grew sesame on planted into a wet soil profile,
Hmm.
and then in season, over about 120 days, we received only about 100 millimeters, which is 4 inches.
Yep.
So not a lot of rainfall to carry that crop through, and it does pretty well in the dry. But to improve those yields, we're looking at how we're going to manage irrigation, and particularly in those different geographic areas.
That's fascinating. The fit for us. So we've been, and as you know, we've had sesame in Oklahoma now. I think we're on about 15 years, and the fit for us has actually been in the dry land where we're only expecting 4 inches. We're going in maybe after a wheat crop where we harvest wheat in the summer, and we're trying to get a short crop in. We call it a double crop. So we cut our wheat, we plant something if there's moisture, and then hope to have it harvested before the first killing freeze, which is going to be October to November. So a short period. Usually expecting short rainfall, so a good yield. We're hoping for maybe 3 to 600 kilo per hectare. Maybe 3 to 600 pounds of seed per acre is good. We've also fitted in some full season where we go into exceptionally dry regions, but it's always been for us the dry. If we have irrigation, we're probably coming in with a crop like a corn or a soybean or cotton crop for us.
Yeah, okay. So it is much more drought tolerant than trying to get really good yields out of corn
Hmm. Yep.
or even soybeans. So it is one of those really great options. What you're talking about there is in Australia, we'd probably call that like a shoulder crop or a catch crop. So you grow your primary crop, and in Australia, in the north, that is likely to be cotton.
Yeah.
And then to be able to chase that crop with sesame on a lower moisture profile, or to even fit it in as a rotation, because a lot of producers don't like to grow cotton on cotton on cotton in the same patch of ground every single year. So I can see how that would work. But our yields would be higher than what you're sort of bringing in when we use it as a primary irrigated crop.
I would expect with irrigation, much higher yields. I mean, we're putting it in our very dry environment. It's not fitted anywhere in our eastern part of the state. It is our western part where annual rainfall totals are 14 inches to 16, and you're running on that 3 to 4 inch summer rainfall hopes. I guess it'd be what for your sesame. What is a crop rotation that you see it fitting in? Because we have problems with weed control, so it's not going to be a continuous sesame crop. So, what's the optimum rotation that you're looking at?
We do we do see it fitting with cotton because that is our primary crop, and we do see it maybe substituting for the use of mung beans.
Hmm.
Or some of those other bean type crops, if it's used in a rotation with breaking with cotton. So when you grow cotton, because we're growing GM cotton, there can be the use of some of those broadleaf herbicides that might pick out some of the weeds that would then come through with sesame. We are getting in place now through our research and through some of the commercial industry entities. We're getting some more permits renewed so that we have got access to herbicides that can deal with grasses.
Hmm.
But largely, we see this fitting in a rotation that would have cotton, maybe sesame, maybe mung beans, maybe chickpeas, and then potentially even in those winter times into an oat or a wheat crop. So in Australia, we don't go, and particularly across the north, we don't go into a winter frost scenario. We don't get snow. And so we do have the option to crop all year round. And it's just managing around rainfall. In the summer, we need to get planted before we can't get onto the paddock anymore. Sometimes we have fields that will go underwater because of the amount of rainfall that comes in, and we need to be careful about managing our crops through that type of wet, and then trying to push a crop through so that it comes into the dry season when we're harvesting, because there's nothing worse than trying to harvest through rainfall,
Hmm.
and that can damage crop quality, and it can slow down your access. And so we will look at trying to make a farming system that will grow 2 to 3 crops a year with something in the ground most of the time, and of course working in those fallow breaks for certain parts of the farm.
Well, I've got more sesame questions, but I'd be remiss if I didn't address some of the topics above your pennants. By the way, your beautiful pennants behind you, the grain and graze, which is the dual purpose concept, which, as you probably also know, Oklahoma utilizes a dual purpose wheat system. But in your work, I know you're working with dual purpose legumes within the system and other things. So tell us a little bit about your dual purpose work and bringing and is it a new concept to Australia, or has it been around for a long time?
Grain and graze in crops like wheat has been around for quite a long time. And there has been research and there's been practice in that area, particularly in southern areas of Australia for quite a while. But investigations into dual purpose use of legumes, whether as a cropping situation, a forage cropping situation, cut and carry to bale for hay,
Hmm.
or even worked into a pasture scenario, is emerging. It's another one of those emerging areas that we're working in, and rather than perhaps emerging crops, it's an emerging practice.
Hmm.
But what we're trying to do in that is to firstly, with one project where we're working with peanuts, is to increase peanut production in Australia. Again, we import a lot of our peanuts. And so there's an opportunity to grow this really great legume crop that
Hmm.
can work really well in our northern systems, and then to create a good quality, high protein forage for livestock.
Yeah.
Australia, as we have discussed, has got a lot of beef cattle across the north.
Hmm.
It's extensive, it's rangelands, it's often low quality pasture, and our feed gap is often in winter when we are receiving a good amount of dry period, but still a reasonable amount of warmth. And so we're looking at options to fill that feed gap, but with a high quality feed to increase the meat quality of our livestock. We do produce some really good quality meat in Australia, beef,
Yeah.
but there's nothing like the quality of beef that you get out of the US, where the livestock have been grain fed. You can be guaranteed to get a good steak in the US, and we love visiting for more than just that reason, but for that reason as well.
I'm super curious. You've talked about peanuts. So Oklahoma does, and I go back to Oklahoma. You visit along with your husband and family before, and we hope to have you back soon. But we do have also peanut production within a region that's heavily dominated by cattle because it's the peanuts are in the Sandy Hills, which is all associated with some very low rainfall. And so, how are you getting a hay crop or a forage crop off of the peanuts? How are you I'm really curious.
So what we're doing is we're again working out what that soil or the field bed situation can be.
Hmm.
Often you plant peanuts into a bit of a raised bed, and so we're trying to get it into a flatter field, and that'll vary depending on irrigation. When we plant, we let the crop grow through, and we use some clever little applications to help us understand ground cover, and we use a ground cover, so how much of that green biomass has grown to trigger the point of cutting. So at that point, we bring in a hay cutter. We cut the
Really?
peanuts. Yeah,
You're just swathing it.
yes. Let it dry, swath it up, and bale it into small square bales.
Yeah.
And we've had reasonable success doing that. What we've done in our studies is to work out how that cutting of the biomass will impact the yield. What's the trade-off for the peanut yield then? Because it's okay to lose a little bit of yield in that situation because you've got a hay product, and that's also a price point.
Hmm.
Halfway through the season, often we're finding that we're cutting at about 7 weeks into the season, maybe 6 or 7 weeks of growth, and we can cut for hay. What we have found is that cutting for hay twice isn't a very good idea. It doesn't help the nut production at all. So we've looked at some of those things. How many times can we cut, and what time can we cut? But we're literally cutting it for hay, dropping it onto the ground, swathing it up, baling it, and carrying it off the field.
I guess I shouldn't be so excited. I mean, so surprised. I'm right now running the interim lab director for our soil testing lab, and I'm working through our forage results. And in the list of crop codes is a peanut hay. So it's done here, but I don't think we've had a sample submitted in the last decade. So I'm wondering if it's an old practice that might have been abandoned and might need to be reevaluated again with what you're doing. Because I could really see it being of value, especially in our drought times when we're looking for that high quality hay to combine with low quality hay and that feed ration. That's interesting.
Absolutely, and I think it has been a practice that's been looked at in Florida
Hmm.
quite a while ago now. I think it is always worth reevaluating some of these options, particularly as we come into um, uh, different scenarios, climate scenarios, and finding those options that will work for producers. So it is a good idea sometimes to look at things that might have might not have quite hit the mark in the past. And then the other thing is that we're starting to increase our ability to use more of the product. So
Hmm.
we get a in-season cut of biomass. We can allow the peanuts to grow. We get a nut product at the end. And then we might look at, and I'm not a really big fan of this, is to bale up the hay, the biomass hay at the end. I think that we're taking a lot out of the system if we do that.
Yeah.
But if we've got localized processing plants, then you've got the peanut shell that can go into maybe a feedlot ration.
Hmm.
And there's every single part of that plant that can be used in some way as a feed resource. And when we're talking about legumes, and this is what's exciting about some of these dual purpose legumes we're looking at protein, which will increase that meat quality compared to some of the grasses that particularly over winter aren't as good.
It's time for our famous three.
Wisenetics turns podcast airtime into brand authority. We don't sell ads, we elevate voices. Curious how far your voice can go to become a reference in the industry and attract more leads? Scan the QR code and discover how we can turn your expertise into unmatched brand authority. Let's transform expertise into influence, starting now.
Tieneke, as it usually happens when I get somebody on, a guest that I just have too much fun with, we've already hit our time limit. The bosses say I should shut down at this time, so we're going to transition into my three questions I always ask my guest, with hopes we can bring you back on later or film from location when you come to the States, hopefully. But my three questions I always ask is, what is a go-to work resource? Where do you go when you have questions, or just something you use often?
So I alluded to this before. When we are looking in the field to understand plant biomass and ground cover, we use the Canopio app, which was developed, I believe, with you guys at Oklahoma State. So we were fortunate to visit a while ago, and we learn about this application, and we use it regularly in season. It's fantastic. It's a very useful tool. And we'll be using it well into the future.
Now, in all your free time, because I can tell you have a ton of free time, what's something you do as a leisurely activity?
I have two teenage boys, and I spend a lot of time chasing after them. In Australia, we don't have a lot of baseball, but we do have in our town softball. And my boys are incredible softball fans. If they could play baseball, they will.
Yeah.
And if we can get to the US next year, perhaps something like that would be on the cards. So we play a lot of softball in our family.
Is that fast pitch softball?
Fast pitch softball. I will not face a batting against my 15-year-old son. It comes in way too fast for me.
I'm more of a fan of the beer league slow pitch softball is more of my style. But
I've seen and heard of this, and I hope to be able to experience it.
oh, absolutely. The first part of the phrase is more important as the slow pitch part. But finally, our last question, where do people go to find out more about what you're doing in your project?
Probably the best place to visit is either to hop onto Google and to look at the CQ University website. You could also look at the CRCNA website. They're one of our funders, the Cooperative Research Centre for Developing Northern Australia. And then there's a lot of fantastic Sesame-based resources on the AgriFutures Australia website. So they're the three best places.
Thank you so much. Again, folks, that wraps up another episode of the Crop Science Podcast Show presented by Wisenetics. Thanks for joining us today with our guest, Dr. Tieneke Trotter. She is researcher and teacher at the Central Queensland University in Australia. She focuses on crop and pasture agronomy. Folks, again, if you enjoyed this podcast, share it out there, share it with your friends. Hit that subscribe button so you get notifications whenever we have anything new released. And also leave any comments or suggestions. If you have questions for our guests, or if you have a suggestion for a new guest, please let us know. Tieneke, thank you so much again for joining us today. I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much for having me, and I hope I'll be stateside sometime soon.
Absolutely.